So are we all at Mark chapter 15, verse 42? Did I give y'all the verse? Verse 42. And so we're going to actually start reading at verse 42, and we're going to read all the way down to verse 8 of chapter 16. So we're going to cover portions of two chapters. Begin reading at verse number 42. It says, "Hear God's word to us. And when evening had come, since it was the day of preparation, that is, the day before the Sabbath, Joseph of Arimathea, a respected member of the council who was also himself looking for the kingdom of God, took courage and went to Pilate and asked for the body of Jesus. Pilate was surprised to hear that he should have died already. And summoning the centurion summoning from the centurion, he asked him whether he was already dead. And when he learned from the centurion that he was dead, he granted the corpse to Joseph. And Joseph bought a linen shroud, and taking him down, wrapped him in the linen shroud and laid him in a tomb that had been cut out of the rock. And he rolled a stone against the entrance of the tomb. Mary Magdalene and Mary, the mother of Joseph, saw where he laid." Picking up at verse number 1 of chapter 16, "When the Sabbath was past, Mary Magdalene, Mary, the mother of James, and Salome bought spices so that they might go and anoint him," Jesus. "And very early on the first day of the week, when the sun had risen, they went to the tomb. And they were saying to one another, 'Who will roll the stone away for us? Who will roll away the stone for us from the entrance of the tomb?' And looking up, they saw that the stone had been rolled back. It was very large. And entering the tomb, they saw a young man sitting on the right side, dressed in a white robe, and they were alarmed. And he said to them, 'Do not be alarmed. You seek Jesus of Nazareth, who was crucified. He has risen. He is not here. See the place where they laid him. But go, tell his disciples and Peter that he is going before you to Galilee. There you will see him, just as he told you.' And they went out and fled from the tomb, for trembling and astonishment had seized them, and they said nothing to anyone, for they were afraid." The word of the Lord is blessed. Amen. I would like to title our sermon this morning from this passage, "I Told You So." Touch your neighbor and tell your neighbor, "I told you so." That's not a phrase that you want to hear from somebody, is it? Some of y'all sitting you're sitting next to the right person because you got to tell them what you've been waiting to tell them for a long time. You can thank me after service. In case you did not know already, we're here today because of the account that this passage lifts up for us to read. We're here today because Jesus got up out of the grave. Captain Obvious, right? Perhaps some of you are thinking, isn't there anything else to preach on Easter Sunday morning besides the resurrection? And while that might be one way of thinking about it, it doesn't make sense to me to preach about anything else besides the resurrection today, because after all, that is the reason why we're all here today. I don't know how you got here. I don't know who brought you here. I don't know if you don't want to be here. But I know one thing, you're here today because of the resurrection of Jesus Christ. Even if you don't believe in it, I know that you're here today because it's Easter Sunday morning and we celebrate the resurrection of Jesus Christ. I don't know how we got to this, but there's this notion that Easter Sunday perhaps isn't worth the hype. It baffles me how some folks, even professing Christians, choose to stay home for Easter Sunday because they want to avoid the hype. They want to avoid the crowd. It baffles me. I'll never forget 10 years ago, a little bit over 10 years ago, or somewhere near 10 years ago, this lady who I know loves the Lord, dedicated to the Lord, devoted to the Lord. She told me, she was like, "I'm not coming to church on Easter Sunday morning because there is too much hype surrounding Easter. She didn't want to have to fight the crowd. She didn't want to have to fight to find parking. She didn't want to be inconvenienced because she couldn't sit in her normal seat on Sunday morning. And my contention will always be that Easter Sunday morning is worth all the hype and some more. Y'all think Beyonce's Homecoming was worth the hype. And y'all think that the new season of Game of Thrones is worth the hype. But let me just tell you, coming to church on Easter Sunday morning, it is worth the hype because indeed the tomb is empty. Jesus has risen, and it is worth the hype and some more. Some folks who know should be saying amen right there. I don't know if you heard it in the text, but I'm going to read it for you again. Starting at verse 4, it says that the stone had been rolled back. And entering the tomb, they saw a young man sitting on the right side. That young man was not Jesus. He was dressed in a white robe, and they were alarmed. It was an angel. Verse 6 says, and he said to them, do not be alarmed. You seek Jesus of Nazareth, who was crucified. He has risen, and he is not here. Y'all, that statement right there is worth the hype. If perhaps you're here today and you don't come to church that often, and you were a little sheepish about coming to church because it's Easter and you didn't want people to think you only come to church on Easter, I want to applaud you today. Thank you for coming to church today. You recognize there is significance in this day by you being here. And I want to let you know you are welcome here. You're welcome here today. You're welcome here any other Sunday. Anytime we have Bible study, anytime we have prayer service, anytime the choir rehearsals, you can still come on. You are welcome here. In fact, I'll gladly give up my seat for you. I don't mind at all. I'll gladly fight to find a parking space. Matter of fact, I'll get to church early to make sure I get a parking space. I salute you for coming to church today. And if you're here today and you come to church often, maybe you don't come every Sunday, but even those of you who come every Sunday, I want to salute you as well. Thank you for fighting the crowd. Some of you are sitting in seats that you don't normally sit in because your seat is taken. Thank you for coming today. I salute you and I applaud you and commend you. I know it's uncomfortable because you're not in your normal seat, but can I say thank you for being here today? You did the right thing. You showed up at the right place, and it is worth all the hype. The tomb is empty. Jesus is risen. And that's the reason we celebrate today. But there's something curious to me about this passage today that I would like to point out to you. And it's in verse number 6. It says that the angel says to the two Marys and Salome, the angel says to them, go tell Jesus' disciples and Peter that he is going before you to Galilee. There you will see him just as he told you. Those words, just as he told you, are puzzling to me. They're puzzling because if Jesus had told them that he was going to rise from the dead and that he was going to go before them to Galilee, by going to the tomb and not Galilee, did they show up at the wrong place? Jesus had told them, if you look over to chapter 14 in your spare time, he had told them in verse number 27 of chapter 14, he says, listen, you will all fall away. It is written, but after I am raised up, I will go before you to Galilee. He said, I'm going to die. And it was multiple times that he said he was going to die, he's going to be buried, and in 3 days he's going to be raised. But in this particular passage, just in this account, I hope some folks who were here during the series remember us preaching from this, and I told you that the sermon title for that sermon was, He Told You So. And here we are again at these same words, I told you so. And they had seen Jesus do what he had said he would do before. Matter of fact, in chapter 14, Jesus had told them, listen, I want you to go into town. We're about to have the Passover, and I want you to let you know that I have already gone ahead and start setting things up. And you're not going to believe this, but you're going to run into this man randomly on the street, but you ask him, where should we take our Jesus, our master, to have the Passover meal? And you will see that it will happen just as I told you. And it happened just as Jesus, they had seen Jesus say something would happen, and it happens. But here it is. They heard Jesus say that he was going to go before them into Galilee, but they show up at the tomb and not Galilee. Had they believed Jesus' words, had they believed that he would be raised from the dead and would go before them to Galilee, how should they have responded? Where should they have gone? I don't know if any of you have ever showed up at the wrong place before. Maybe you showed up at the right place at the wrong time, but something curious happened that I thought was funny happened late last year and then again earlier this year. I was attending a meeting at a church in D.C., and the name of the church is New Samaritan Baptist Church. It is at 1100 Florida Avenue Northeast in Trinidad. Anybody know where Trinidad is? Yes, it's one of the few neighborhoods that's not quite gentrified yet, thank the Lord. So it's at 1100 Florida Avenue Northeast. And I was attending this meeting with other local pastors, and one of my good friends, he called me probably about 5 minutes into the meeting, and I was like, dude, my phone is ringing. I don't normally answer my phone when in a meeting, but I knew he was supposed to be there. I was like, something must be going on. So I answered my phone. I walked out and answered my phone. And he said, dude, I cannot find this place. Can't find the church. He said, when I left home, I put into my GPS system New Samaritan Baptist Church. And it took me to 1100 Florida Avenue, and I'm looking around, I can't find it. I said, dude, I don't know what to tell you. I mean, it's at 1100 Florida Avenue. And somehow or another, after we are scratching our heads, comes to find out he was at 1100 Florida Avenue Northwest and not 1100 Florida Avenue Northeast. He was at the wrong place. But here's where it gets even funnier. I'm not going to put my wife on blast, but y'all can laugh with us, okay? So they had another meeting, the same place, at the beginning of this year. And Lady Keisha's going to bring me some breakfast, helping me out, bringing me some breakfast. And so she put into the GPS New Samaritan Baptist Church. My wife knows where New Samaritan Baptist Church is, but you know how we do, Minister Drew. We always put where we're going into our GPS because we rely on our GPS. And so she put it into the GPS, and she ended up at 1100 Florida Avenue Northwest. Crazy, right? Apparently, what has happened is New Samaritan Baptist Church, somehow or another, it has been mixed up in the GPS systems that it sends people to Northwest instead of Northeast. That's crazy how we listen to the GPS and think that it's correctly guiding us, and it leads us to the wrong destination. I know we like our GPSs, Minister Drew, because I do too. But sometimes our GPS can lead us to the wrong place. All my senior saints in the room are saying amen. I know that. Has that happened to anyone before? You end up in the wrong place. Well, as I approach this passage of the account of this empty tomb again, for the first time ever, I was struck, particularly as I read the words, Jesus is going before you to Galilee. There you will see him just as he told you. Because it made me wonder, did they show up at the wrong place? Now, I need to make something really, really clear to you, because some have argued over the years that perhaps the women showed up at the wrong tomb. And I am not talking about whether or not they showed up at the wrong tomb, because they actually did show up at the right tomb. And what Mark does in this passage, in these verses that you need to know, is that he makes sure he gives us the details of what happened, because he wants there to be certainty. He wants it to be verified. He wants to be unmistakable that they indeed showed up at the right tomb, but not just that they showed up at the right tomb, but one, that Jesus actually really did die, that his death was certified, and two, they verified the place where he was laid. in order to do this, trek with me just for a little bit, what he does is he presents to us this man. He tells us about this man named Joseph. Joseph was a devout, dedicated person to Jesus. He had devout devotion to Jesus. And he was devout because he was a man that everybody in the community kind of respected. He was an upright, standing man, and everybody respected him. So he asked, it was odd for him to actually ask for Jesus' body from Pilate, but he asked for Jesus' body because this devout man wanted to make sure that Jesus got a proper burial. So he goes and he makes sure that Jesus gets a proper burial, but he has to go to Pilate, and when he gets to Pilate is like, wait a minute, is Jesus dead already? So with the crucifixion, oftentimes it would take 2 to 3 days before the person on the cross would actually die. So it was puzzling to him that just a few hours earlier, Jesus had been nailed to the cross, and now he's getting a report that he's already dead. And so he sends word to the centurion. He's like, send my soldier here. And the centurion is the same centurion last week that we saw. He looked up and he said, surely this was the Son of God. He comes and he tells Pilate, yeah, he is dead. He's certifiably dead. We can verify his death because as other gospel accounts tell us, they pierced him in his side and blood and water flowed out, which gave the indication that he actually was dead. They would not have given the body to them if he wasn't dead. Because perhaps he would get up. But he was certifiably dead. And Mark tells us that that this devout, devoted man to Jesus, he gets the body so that he has a proper burial, and he certifies that he's dead. And then they certify and verify where his body is laid. Do you see there? I want you to look at verse number 46. It tells that Joseph, he took him down. He gives him the proper burial, linen and shroud, and take him down, wrap them. And then they cut out the tomb. They cut out the rock in the tomb. So they didn't put bodies in the ground back then. They had a cave or a rock, and they would cut out a space in the rock, and they would lay a body on top of this cutout in the rock. And what they would do was they would roll a stone against the entrance of the tomb. That was in order to make sure that grave robbers would not come and try to steal the body or steal the possessions that are in the tomb. And so they made sure that they rolled this rock over this tomb, and it was sealed. And it says that Mary Magdalene and Mary, the mother of Joseph, saw where he was laid. That means that they were right there, and they saw with their very eyes not only where they laid Jesus, but they saw that the tomb had been rolled over, the stone had been rolled over in front of the tomb. They knew that the tomb was sealed shut. And so it wasn't that they showed up at the wrong tomb. And so not only are we seeing that it's verifiable that they showed up at the right tomb, but then we see these two dedicated and devoted 3 women who go and they go to anoint Jesus' body. Basically, here's what they were trying to do. They didn't do embalming back then to preserve the body from decaying. What they would do is they would go and put oils and spices and scents on the body so that as it decayed, it wouldn't stink. And so because Jesus had gotten down from the cross and it was late in the day, they wanted to make sure that they hurry up and buried him before the Sabbath day. They didn't have a chance to anoint his body and to put perfumes on his body. So they said, after Sabbath is over, we're going to go and buy these scents and stuff, and then we're going to go to the tomb and make sure that his body doesn't stink as it's decaying. So y'all, can you imagine? This is on the 3rd day after Jesus has died. His body has to be stinking a little bit. His body is decaying and decomposing a little bit. And they're going out to put perfume on this dead body that's been dead 3 days. That's some dedicated devotion right there. And these women, out of their dedication and devotion to Jesus, they go, but when they go to the tomb, they discover something that they never intended to see. These dedicated and devoted women, they were going to the tomb, and you know what they were expecting as they were going to the tomb? They were expecting a difficulty. They were thinking, there's going to be that stone is still going to be in front of the tomb. How are we going to get this stone away? They were expecting not only a difficulty, but they were expecting death. They expected to see Jesus dead. They were going to the tomb. You know what else they were expecting? They were expecting decay. They were expecting for the body to already have started decaying and decomposing. They were expecting to discover that Jesus' body was still dead. And they go to the tomb. And this is so important for us because even though I'm puzzled about the fact of whether or not they showed up at the right place, we need to know that they showed up at the right tomb. Because we need to know Jesus indeed died. He indeed was buried. He indeed was raised from the dead. Here's why this is important. Because some people will think that perhaps you made up this story. Perhaps somebody just made this story up just to make it believable. But guess what? The fact that these women were the first witnesses of an empty tomb would not have been the way somebody who was making up a story for people to believe would have written it. They would have tried to use some men because back then the witnesses of women was not believable. And so the way that we know it's true is that the women who are the first to see him, they're talked about because that's how it actually happened. And they actually saw what they did not expect to see. They get to the tomb. And as they are approaching the tomb, they're expecting death. But certainly, they weren't expecting to see what they saw. They were expecting Jesus' body to be decomposing, but they weren't expecting to see who they saw. They weren't expecting to see no body. They were expecting to see Jesus, but Jesus was not there. He was not where they'd last seen him. It says, the angel says to them in verse number 6, do not be alarmed. You seek Jesus of Nazareth, who was crucified. He has risen. He is not here. Listen to these words. See the place where they laid him. They were actually able to see just a few days earlier, Jesus had been laid in this tomb. They had seen the stone rolled in front of the tomb and sealed shut. And then they approached the tomb and the stone is no longer in front of the tomb. And they walk into the tomb and they see a man sitting on the right, dressed in white, that's an angel, and they're scared out of their minds. But they don't see Jesus' body. They looked where they had laid Jesus, but he was not there. But had they believed Jesus' words, should they have shown up at the tomb? It is not the empty tomb that proves the resurrection. Hear me good. It is the resurrection that makes the empty tomb meaningful. We have all of these details to certify that Jesus indeed rose from the dead, that the tomb really was empty. But an empty tomb by itself does not provoke for you to follow Jesus for the rest of your life. Many of you are here today, and I can tell you why you're here today. You're here today because you believe that the tomb is empty. You believe that Jesus was raised from the dead. You believe the report of the two Marys and Salome. You believe it. But my question is, not just whether or not you believe that the tomb is empty, but have you placed faith in the one who was resurrected from the dead? Because what Mark does here in this passage, while he is lifting up the uniqueness of this devout man who was devoted to Jesus, and these dedicated women who were also devoted to Jesus, he really is putting forward for us to consider, will we believe Jesus' words or not? And where will we show up if we believe his words? See, the difference between belief and faith is about what you do based off of what you believe. And the thing that unlocks newness in your life is not whether you simply believe, but whether you place faith in what you say you believe. So whether or not you place faith in what you say you believe is based on, we know it based on what you do in response to Jesus' words. I love these women. I absolutely love Mary and Salome. But guess what? They didn't have faith in Jesus. Because they showed up at the tomb looking for a dead body when Jesus had said, I'm going to raise up and I'm going to meet y'all in Galilee. The question is, will I believe Jesus when he says, I told you so? Where are you showing up as a response of Jesus? And here it is. They approached the tomb and they found the tomb empty, but they were expecting death. But had they met Jesus where he said they would see him, they would have seen life in him resurrected from the dead. I am here this morning because I want someone in this room to move from merely belief to faith in what you believe. And when you place faith in what you believe, supernaturally you come to life because you place faith in the one who resurrected from the dead and is now living. I'm trying to help somebody out in this room today. You're trying to figure out why dead things are not coming to life in your situation. Because you're going to dead things looking for life. You will never find life in dead stuff. You have to go to the one who is life in order for you to get life. See, for those of us who have placed faith in Jesus, even when something dies, we don't lose hope because we're confident that there is life after death. There is no shaking about it. There's no if, ands, or but about it. We are certain about the fact that if somebody places faith in Jesus, that one day we will see them again. Their bodies are just sleeping right now. But one day they're going to wake up from their sleep and they will be resurrected with Jesus. See, those of us who place faith in Jesus, we believe the words of Jesus when he says, if you come to me, all you who are heavy, burdened, and laden, I will give you rest. But that means that I've got to leave everything else. And the problem is that many of us think that by leaving that stuff, we're leaving life. But that stuff is dead. And Jesus is offering us life in him. This day, it is about an empty tomb. But the empty tomb is only evidence that Jesus lives. The empty tomb only points us to the fact that Jesus has been raised. Don't stop at the empty tomb. Move on to the resurrected Jesus. The resurrection of Jesus Christ is so phenomenal that it is supposed to ignite and spark faith in our lives. That we follow the words of Jesus. We follow the words of Jesus, even when it doesn't make sense. Had the three women gone to Galilee, people would have said, why are you going to Galilee? That doesn't make sense. People would have said, listen, you didn't get a chance to anoint Jesus' body to make sure that his body doesn't start decaying and stinking as it decays. It doesn't make sense. But had they gone to Galilee, it would have demonstrated they believed his words, that they had placed faith in his words. Are you placing faith in the words of Jesus or not? I want to let you know that it is not blind faith. It is not irrational faith. I just told you, Mark tells us that what we place our faith in, it is credible. It has been verified. It has been certified. It is unmistakable that Jesus died, was buried, and rose again. There is enough proof to let us know that indeed he is risen. So it's not blind faith. But I encourage you today to leave your life of pursuing death and to begin to live your life pursuing life in Jesus. Apart from God's help, none of us really know what to make of Jesus' resurrection. None of us really know what to do with it. None of us really know what to do with the empty tomb. Yeah, we believe that it's empty, and even the Marys, they believed that it was empty. But for many of us, it goes no further than that. I hope you saw in the text, in verse number 8, it says that they went out and fled the tomb, for trembling and astonishment had seized them, and they said nothing to anyone, for they were afraid. Many of us hear that Jesus got up out of the grave, that the tomb is now empty, and we're astonished by it. We're mesmerized by it. Maybe it even makes you a little bit scared because you don't quite understand it. And you need to know this. You need God's help to place faith in Jesus. In the world that we live in, it almost makes no sense to do it. But you have enough proof to follow Jesus to life. You have enough evidence that he will lead you to life. You have enough evidence to believe his words. Even if you don't want to believe what's in the scripture. I know for certainty that everyone in this room can think of a time where God kept you from something that you should not have been kept from. Where God turned a situation around that was dead and then brought it back and made it for your good. And he's been demonstrating to you before so that you can see that I told you so before. If you will follow me now, you will see again that I told you so. Keep following me all the way until I come back again. And then when we get into heaven, you'll be able to look back and say, see, I told you so. Follow Jesus to life. The cross doesn't make sense without the resurrection. The cross is only informed by the resurrection. The cross, had the resurrection not happened, it would have been just like a normal old funeral. It would have been just like a normal old burial. It would have been just like a normal old unjust police brutality that we have seen all across our country and even recently. It would have gone away just like when we see injustices happen and police brutality happen on social media, in a day or two we've forgotten about it. That's what the cross would have been like. But because of the resurrection, the cross makes sense. Because of the resurrection, When we look at the empty tomb now, we see that death has lost all its power because of the resurrection of Jesus Christ. And you need to know in your life, if you place faith in Jesus, if you follow his words, if you recognize him as being the one that saved you, you can look at the tomb and say, death and sin has been emptied of its power. I now can experience true life in Jesus Christ. Your life will only make sense informed by the resurrection of Jesus Christ. Just like the cross only makes sense, your life will only make sense if it is informed by the resurrection of Jesus Christ. Because there are going to be some times that comes in your life, even after you follow Jesus, that doesn't make sense. You're going to think, Jesus, have you been asleep on the job? I followed you, and now I'm experiencing this headache. I followed you, and now I'm experiencing this heartache. I followed you, and now I'm experiencing this depression. I followed you, and now I'm experiencing this sadness. I followed you, and now I'm experiencing this loneliness. And you're going to think that perhaps Jesus has been asleep on the job, that he's allowed things to come in your life that will destroy you. But no, he's not asleep on the job. Because of the resurrection, it lets us know that he actually is working all things together for our good. Because the cross doesn't make sense without the resurrection. But because of the resurrection, we see that the cross and the burial, now we see God was working all things out, not just for a temporary good, but for eternal good for us. This morning, I want to give someone the opportunity to do what I gave my wife and my friend, Pastor Bobby, the opportunity to do. They had showed up at the wrong place. They were at 1100 Florida Avenue Northwest, and they should have been at 1100 Florida Avenue Northeast. And I said, listen, make a U-turn and start heading the opposite direction down the same street. And 22 blocks later, you'll see the destination that you were trying to get to. I want to give someone that opportunity on this morning. Maybe you're showing up at the wrong place. And all you see at that place is difficulty, death, decay, and decomposing. But if you'll turn around, believe in the words of Jesus, he can give you life. You'll see what you did not expect to see. You'll experience joy like never before. You'll be fulfilled like never before. You'll be satisfied like never before. If you're thirsty, if you're hungry, if you're lonely, he will provide. He will turn your life around. And when he does it, he'll say, I told you so, but he don't say it like we did. Y'all know earlier when you were looking at your neighbor and you were so happy to be able to say, I told you so to your neighbor. That's not how Jesus says, I told you so. He doesn't say it spitefully. He says it invitingly. He says, I told you so. I told you so. I told you so. And initially, when you leave death and decay, it's going to feel kind of weird. It's going to feel kind of weird Because that's all that you are used to. That's all that you know. That's all that your mind knows is death and decay. And here's the thing. If you would just follow Jesus, keep following Jesus. Believe and know that he makes your life new when you place your faith in him. You'll see over time. He did tell me so. He did tell me he would make all things new. He did tell me he would raise dead things to life. He did tell me he would heal. He did tell me that he would work on my mind. He would transform my mind. He did tell me he would give me new affections. He did tell me he would give me new power to do what I could not do before. Hallelujah!